Toe die president laasweek met die nasie gepraat het 21 vroue en kinders reeds hulle lewe as gevolg van gender-based violence verloor. Nou behalwe die gevalle waarvan ons in die nuus hoor, is ek seker jy self weet van sulke dinge daar in jou gemeenskap, in jou straat of baie keer sommer in jou eie huis. Die tyd vir stil bly is verby. My gas vanaand is Dr. Lizelle de Wee, 'n kliniese sielkundige aan die Universiteit van Johannesburg. Dit is baie lekker om jou weer hier te hê, Dr. de Wee. Ek gaan maar Lizelle sê, né?
Absoluut.
Kom ons begin met jou keuse vir 'n onderwerp vir jou tesis destyds, corrective rape. Waarom?
Corrective rape of black lesbian women, South African black lesbian women, and simply because it's much like gender-based violence is very much topical at the moment and very sensationalized. We see it everywhere in the media, as you just mentioned. That was exactly the phenomenon that was happening at the time. It was everywhere in the newspapers, news headlines.
Yeah.
Black butch lesbian women were being slaughtered through very heinous crimes at the time. And in my practice, I had been dealing with a lot of women for whom I felt psychology as a profession didn't have the tools necessary to be equipped enough to be able to deal with this and to speak to this. So there was a loop, there was a gap in terms of research and understanding locally in particular.
En as mense vanaand na ons kyk en sê wat is hierdie corrective rape waaroor hierdie geleerde vrou praat, hoe verduidelik 'n mens dit soort van in 'n een sin definisie?
It's basically the intention to rape a woman with the intention to change her sexual orientation, or with the perception that through raping her, one can change her from being a lesbian into a straight woman.
Gebeur dieselfde met mans wat gay is?
If it does, it's not as pervasive, Heinrich, as is the case with women in particular. And I suppose the reason for that is the women that were in particular victim to this type of rape was the women that present themselves as butch. So those that perform gender in a more masculine way and not in the traditional effeminate way, one would say.
Ons onderwerp vanaand oorhoofs is geslagsgebaseerde geweld, wat ons weet wat baie erg in Suid-Afrika is. Hoekom sal jy sê het ons elkeen uiteindelik 'n rol om daarteen uit te praat of saam in optogte en protesaksies byvoorbeeld deel te neem?
I think it's a very personal thing. It would be very irresponsible to pretend as though if it doesn't affect you, it does affect your life or some family member, whether that is your daughter, your sister, your mother, your niece, some family member within your community, it definitely affects them. I can't necessarily quote the statistics for you off the cuff right now, but I can confirm that South Africa is generally known as the rape capital of the world. And the president also spoke to it a week or so ago when he mentioned the statistics that puts up right up there globally. So it becomes very, I would say, irresponsible to turn a blind eye to something where there's a high likelihood that it affects pretty much every single female that you've ever associated with.
Is daar ooit 'n verskoning of regverdiging vir enige iemand wat wanneer mens praat oor die kwessie vir jou 'n ja maar of 'n yes but aanlas?
It depends. If I answer your question from the perspective of a perpetrator of gender-based violence, there will always be a reason. That much I can tell you. And that is what my research also brought to the fore, because from the perspective of the person who perpetrates it, there would be either justification around patriarchy, or around discipline, or everything that's associated with patriarchy, because that's right at the back burner of the scourge. Gender roles. But realistically, to answer your question, there's never just justification. But people would find ways, or the perpetrators rather, would find ways in order to rationalize it and almost to justify their reason for doing what it is that they do.
Ek weet nie of daar noodwendig navorsing gedoen is al om vas te stel of persoonlike ervaring aan die kant van 'n slagoffer in die meeste gevalle help dat daai persoon dan nou, kan ek sê, 'n kampvegter raak teen gender-based violence nie. Dalk kan jy iets daaroor sê.
Ek sal so dink in 'n mate. For me personally, I took it upon myself because I just felt as a professional, certainly as I explained, when it came to researching corrective rape in particular, psychology had very little to contribute to this debate. But I personally also had personal experience in my own capacity. In the sense that when in my marriage, I had a breakdown of gradually over the years recognizing that my partner, my husband, was spoke with the hands in the sense that he was violent. And so I survived domestic abuse. It took for me, at a point became so intense that my children started witnessing it. And they were very little at the time still. And it was when at that level that I decided to leave, ultimately. But for me as a professional, it just adds to the level at which you can actually empathize and understand where a woman comes from that says, because you must understand, Heinrich, this is a very stigmatized condition to survive, typically. Whether it's rape, assault, and it exists on a continuum. Gender-based violence can be anything from emotional abuse, psychological abuse, to the actual sexual violation of a woman. So all of these, unfortunately, is typically very much associated with stigma, with labeling, with blaming, also with silencing the perpetrators. So for women typically to speak out about it, it becomes very hard because their very community and their families oftentimes turn against them in favor of the perpetrator.
Ons sal nou 'n bietjie verder gesels daaroor, Lizelle. So bly asseblief ingeskakel want ons sit die gesprek voort na die breek.